Hey, welcome back to Guard Bros Field Desk. Today you might hear a bit of background noise due to a very windy day here in Kansas, so I apologize for that audio disruption. But this video also features Amanda, who's filling in for the role of Helena. We picked her up a few weeks ago, had to do some test lines, and she is pretty good. Pretty good. As for what happened to Icicle, I simply do not know. Tried to contact her a few times, pure radio silence. Not sure what's going on with Icicle, but I hope she's doing well and everything's okay. You know what I mean? It's a little annoying, but I do hope she's okay. Now before we get into the video, of course we gotta do the usual rigmarole. Y'all gonna skip by, but to those of you who don't skip by, need to learn about Redcon 1, our main affiliate for the channel. At Redcon 1, you can get all of the supplement, dietary, and protein needs that you might need while giving your body the best workout you can. Everyone has to work out. In order to work out properly, you gotta eat properly, and that's where Redcon 1 steps in. I know a lot of you listen to the stories while at work, and quite a few of you are truckers. And if you live a non-movement based job, you gotta maintain eating right so that way you can help keep the weight off your hips. A problem I still have even though I do work out. This can be facilitated by the whole animal proteins they put in their protein powder. That's salmon, fish, chicken. They do sell whey protein, but the meal replacement things are a high calorie dense, high protein drink that you can have through the day to help satisfy cravings, as well as just make sure you have all the vitamins and protein you need. And not only do they have protein powder, they have also supplements to help you sleep, such as Fade Out. Green juice, which is also called GI juice, to give you all the, vegetable stuff you may need, fiber and all that. As well as Breach, which is kind of like after workout, pre-workout slash, energy boost in case you need to, keep pumping through the day. They got all kinds of things on Redcon 1. Stop by, because I want you to be healthy. I want all my viewers to be as healthy as they can be. And it doesn't take a lot of money to be healthy. Just get your foot in the door. There's a discount code down below. Just get something that you need. Protein powder, something to keep you awake. It's not like a Monster energy drink. Just try and keep your body working just a little bit better, and that's all I need and ask for. But anyway, besides this, let's get on to Chapter 7. Chapter 7, In the Rain, Section 222. Helena tapped at the cotton fluff inside her ears with a pinky, then nodded to Momoy, who began to empty an entire belt of 7.62 ammunition towards the wood line. They had been doing this every 2 hours since they recovered Vitka, and with the help of Limerick and his stolen radios, got into contact with Ors. The forces of Ors were under the command of the human lone wanderer called Grouch, who after learning that a contingent of centaurs was inbound to rescue a female dignitary, dug in his claws so deeply that even his superiors in tall wheat were confused. After Momoy finished the belt, he looked over his shoulder, pulling the smoking M240 Bravo off of the spare wheel of his WLA.
Are you kidding me? I thought you guys were here to collect the brass.
We are!
Cried out a nearby delivery harpy as she sprinkled more empty brass casings onto Vitka, who was giggling and making brass angels on the ground.
Brass harpies. Brass for brass throne.
Vitka giggled out, sputtering playfully as the other harpy accidentally dropped brass onto her face. The male delivery harpy, a J, rolled his eyes as he continued pecking away the brass into flight bags.
Steel Knuckle going to have heads if delivery harpy too slow. Gabrika know this.
Gabrika, the other harpy sprinkling another wingful of brass onto Vitka, looked over at the J harpy and stuck out her tongue.
Been working for days. Not Gabrika's fault. You're a stickler for work.
Jahai lame harpy.
Vitka called out, and both she and Gabrika giggled, both throwing fistfuls of brass at each other and running away. Naturally, the smaller sparrow harpy was faster in the air, but on land, Vitka had an easy time tackling her, the two laughing raucously as they rolled in the grass in mock battle. Eldehinda watched the two of them as she slowly cut a slice of sausage with her smaller belt knife, shaking her head disapprovingly as Vitka made mock slashing motions at Gabrika, who squealed happily.
I thought they grew out of this shit when they were winglings. Us dwarfs have full-time jobs by the time we're 10. And these two grown harpies are still acting like they're fresh from the nurseries.
Oh, let them play. Vitka was very close to death yesterday, and she probably needs to blow off the steam.
Limerick said, clicking two halves of his radio back together and putting the smaller screws into their pre-drilled holes.
Better she do it now with another harpy than her trying it with one of us.
Eldehinda snorted, tossing her slice of sausage into her mouth.
I can see the artillery platoons.
Makarat said, herself perched up onto a bike and straddling it, leaning over the fuel tank and resting her elbows on the handlebars. Down below, she had a pair of binoculars trained on the artillery positions and oars.
They have bottles of wine all around them. There's even a small kitchen down there. Looks like some kind of stew, a large dinner roll. I bet it's even just hot enough to soothe the soul, but cool enough where you don't have to do the mouth-too-hot breathing thing.
Helena felt Makarat's stomach growl, and she raised her eyebrows at the brim touched, pulling out the rest of the fluff from her ears.
I have never heard anyone obsess over food like you, Makarat.
Cold cheese, cold meat, salted fish, expedition bread, dried berries.
Makarat said hatefully, her hips wiggling back and forth on the seat as Helena rolled her eyes.
What I wouldn't do for a hot bowl of stew with vegetables, hot bread, and butter.
Well, what's keeping you?
Momoy said, gesturing out towards the great expanse of ruined field before them.
Go on. Go into town and get it.
Makarat slammed her hands on the R-75's handlebars.
I would love to, my big Harioni friend, but there's an entire battalion of human-led enemy troopers in that forest.
She barked, gesturing with her hands at the long tree line that smoked steadily in the distance.
If we go too far past our cover, they'll blow me, my bike, and my appetite to small bits of meat and bone.
Well, then I guess you'll have to settle for cold cheese, cold meat, and these icky little dried berries.
Momoy said with a smile, flicking a dried Arlbaum cherry at Makarat.
Aren't you two done yet?
Eldehinda called out to the harpies, slowly cutting off another slice of sausage and handing it over to Erinda, who was sitting down next to her and laying against a crate covered in a blanket.
I do find it quite fascinating that they're able to keep up their mood despite being next to an active combat zone.
Erinda said, reaching over and taking the slice of sausage with a smile. Eldehinda grumbled in her throat.
I would find it more fascinating if they actually got some work done.
Eldehinda was beginning to have her fill of harpies. Due to how the road was and the forest bordering them on either side, they would have to backtrack for miles in order to find a route through it to take the back way in the oars. At the same time, if they even attempted to scoot past the cover of their hill, they would likely be met with withering gun and cannon fire. They were getting supplied mainly through harpies, as Erinda ate quite a bit of food due to her greater caloric intake, but was mainly more field rations. They were having problems convincing the harpies to lug heavier loads due to the fact they would be slower and lower, making them prime targets for sharpshooters.
Eldehinda, look. Vitka has caught wayward harpy.
Vitka said in mock triumph, strutting towards the pile of brass with the giggling Gabrika held over her head in her massive wing claws.
Now Gabrika can do work and stop running around making all such noise.
Gabrika played dead, tongue out and all, as Vitka presented her to Eldehinda. Eldehinda glowered at Vitka, while Erinda chuckled in amusement, holding her hand in front of her still chewing mouth.
Great! Fantastic work. You get all the damn brass picked up and sent off with them.
Eldehinda growled, jabbing a finger to Johai, who was beginning to get as angry as Eldehinda. Helena watched Vitka and Gabrika help Johai gather the rest of the brass, as they had been shooting quite a bit and garnered a large amount of it, and pulled out her canteen. In truth, she was beginning to miss hot food as well. They were well fed by all means, sometimes even getting fresh bread from oars from time to time, but they were only a small microorganism in comparison to ores. The forces in ores would be swelling as well, as Grouch had sent off word for more armor and more auxiliaries. But compared to food, there was one thing that was constantly on her mind.
I want a bath so bad.
Helena sighed out.
With hot water and soap.
Makarat looked over at her, binoculars still held in front of her face.
If I have to settle for field rations, you gotta deal with your little bird baths in the forest.
Humans have spoiled you both.
Limerick said with a laugh.
Hot water and new foods have made you both forget where you came from, eh?
Both Helena and Makarat glowered at Limerick, the latter giving him a slowly rising middle finger. Limerick laughed to himself and clicked the power to the radio back on.
Ores 1, this is Section 222. Anything new? Over.
Ores 1 to Section 222, negative, standby for daily. A voice replied, and Limerick sighed. Much to Limerick's lack of surprise, there was, in fact, nothing new at all. This holding pattern continued for 2 more days, the monotonous peppering of the tree line to annoy the forces within being the only break in the tedium. Helena had come to her wits' end, as she had not been able to properly bathe for almost a week, and it was annoying her to every degree. One day, as dust began to erode the sky, she finally broke, and gathered up a few water cans that she had been squirreling away within their little tree-lined hideout along the road. She then went to Makarat, who was laid out on the ground near a tree, reading a book she had borrowed from Limerick.
Makarat, let's go wash.
Helena said, her voice seething with frustration. Makarat leaned her face a smidge around the edge of her book, looking at the steaming Helena holding 2 water cans. Helena looked as if someone had stolen her sweet roll, and Makarat was a little cautious.
What you talking about, buddy?
You and I are going into the woods, and we are going to wash. Properly. With water and soap. I need someone to come with me. That's you.
Helena said with an edge to her voice, and she narrowed her eyes at Makarat. Makarat looked around for help, found none, then sat up on her elbows.
Helena, I don't mean to be rude, but I outrank you as a specialist. Why do you...
Get up, Makarat.
Helena spat, and the look in her eyes made Makarat skitter up onto her feet in a crouch.
Okay, I'm getting up. Jeez.
Makarat said, reaching over and grabbing her kit bag. Thankfully, the laundry service in Ores was still working, and they received freshly laundered uniforms earlier that morning.
Slack and sack, Helena. What's gotten into you?
Makarat shrank her head back as Helena dropped a water can and jabbed a finger in front of her nose.
I'm going to wash your hair, then you're going to wash my hair. We're going to use soap, we're going to smell great, and we're going to be women again. Got it?
Uh-huh.
Makarat said worriedly as Helena picked up the water can and trudged off, her own rucksack on her back. She had never seen Helena like this, and it was kinda spooky.
If I go into these woods and this is some kind of weird elven bathing murder ritual, I at least hope there's sex involved before she kills me.
Makarat muttered, then looked over her shoulder to yell at Momoy.
Momoy, going in the woods to wash myself with Helena. So we should both come back intact with no possibility of horrible screams of death and mutilation.
Okay, have fun.
Momoy called back out, his half-finished wood carving in one hand and knife in the other. He looked over to Limerick, who was nose deep in another human book.
Hey, Limerick.
I'm sure they'll be fine, Momoy. Girl bonding and all that stuff.
Limerick said in a dismissive tone, turning the page of his book.
Did you know humans had special types of soldiers that used smaller mech suits? Apparently they had special voting privileges and didn't have to apply for rights to breed.
Momoy squinted his eyes.
They have to apply to their government in order to have babies?
Wild, isn't it? No wonder they are so tough.
Limerick said excitedly, while Momoy raised his eyebrows and went back to whittling on his wooden horse.
Sounds like a major government overreach to me. As a matter of fact, Prince Nim's father is doing that even now. Anything not an elf with an Alterac is not allowed to bear children unless they are landowners. And even then, we saw what happens to them.
Limerick looked up from his novel.
Why would they only allow landowners to have children?
Well, my head says because they are landowners and thus wealthier. The darker part of me says that it wanted leverage to use against the landowners. After all, he wants it back. If the landowners have children, that's more pieces he can use to navigate around them.
Momoy said, holding a smaller carving knife like a pin as he began to work on the face of the horse.
As for these humans, creating life is sacred and should never be regulated by any force, except for maybe the gods themselves.
You have to admit though, it makes humans tough. Imagine having to go through military service in order to have children. You would only breed warriors, no civilians ever. You think that's why Yule served for so long? From what I hear, he has like 20 offspring.
Limerick said, looking back down to the novel and tilting it so it caught more fading dusk light from the sky.
Yule has only one daughter.
Momoy answered back, blowing shavings off of the face of his horse.
How would you know that?
Limerick asked, eyes flicking up from the book. Momoy shrugged, scooting over on his crate seat as Eldehinda began to walk over, a bulky satchel at her side.
People talk. People learn things.
What business is it to other people how many children that bearded troll has?
Eldehinda chuffed, sitting down on the crate next to Momoy. The crate creaked out wearily, but no one paid a notion to its stripes.
As far as what I've heard, humans breed like a Caine on a mission, so Yule probably didn't feel the need to father his own platoon.
Carina?
Momoy asked.
Right, you're an Oni. You would know them as Rukonis.
Eldehinda replied, pulling out a small keg from a traveling satchel she had slung on her side. Momoy laughed and slapped his knee, having set down his knife to pick up a canteen of water.
Well, I'd be damned. How the hell did you get ale out here?
Money, my bearded Oni, can get you many things.
Eldehinda said with a bright smile as she pulled out the large cork with a deep putting sound.
Such is convincing two harpies to haul this keg of golden happiness in from Tullweed.
Command said they could only manage canteens of water, those lying bastards.
Momoy said with a giddy chuckle as he scrambled over to pull a wooden tankard from his rucksack. Limerick also scrambled over to grab his own wooden tankard.
Should we wake up Vitka?
Fuck no.
Eldehinda said with a toothy grin, taking Momoy's tankard and filling it with the cool brew.
You'd think I paid for a frosting stone so Vitka could get hammered and break a motorbike thinking it was another harpy?
I think the hardest part would be waking her up.
Limerick said with a snort, looking over his shoulder at the harpy who was curled up in a nest of blankets near the WLA. Vitka had been hard at work playing with the other harpies, even roping in the messenger harpies to quick games of tag. At this point in the day, she was so tired she didn't even eat, just collapsing into her blankets and falling right down into a deep sleep. Down the road from them, Helena had found a heavily wooded area and dragged Macrat into it, walking into the woods for some yards until they found a grassy clearing with a few stones. Macrat set down her own can of water and stretched, popping her shoulder muscles.
There we go. We can sit on the rocks like a couple of forest fae. Then, as we're washing, we can learn a few men with our bodies so we have something to eat.
Forest fae are not a thing.
Helena said briskly, pulling out her bar of soap and the other washing items and setting them on a nearby rock. Macrat took off her plate carrier, having brought it with just in case, and began to undo the buttons of her uniform top.
What? Of course they're a thing. My father has seen them.
Helena looked over at her, pulling the cork on a bottle of hair shampoo.
I've been living and fighting out of the forest for years. If they existed, I would have seen one by now.
Of course you haven't seen one. You're not from the same parts as me.
Macrat said matter-of-factly, pulling off her uniform top and then beginning the process of fumbling with her pants buttons.
They only live further north.
How far north would that be?
Helena asked, unbraiding her hair and pulling a few strands of grass from it.
You know, north.
Macrat stammered, now regretting having brought it up in the first place. Helena squinted at her, running her fingers through the ends of her hair.
You seem reluctant to say where you're from.
Macrat swallowed, looking at Helena as she finally got all her buttons undone.
I'm, Okay, look. Don't tell anyone this. But I'm from the Outerest Range, okay?
Whew!
Helena said with a laugh that evolved into a snorting chuckle.
Oh, I see now. What city?
Abston.
Macrat said with a wince.
Whew!
Helena said, pointing a finger at Macrat as she laughed.
Abston?
You're a little rich girl. No wonder your dad has an entire library.
I am not a little rich girl.
Mackarat barked, jabbing an upturned finger at Helena.
I came all the way down here on my own to be a soldier, living in that stupid manor with my stupid mother. Did you know she wanted to marry me to some old fart because he bred the finest horses in the range? Me! Sold for access to good horses.
Helena breathed in with a mocking air.
A manor?
Mackarat rolled her eyes.
Yes, a manor. My grandfather left it to my father when he died. The man was mental with mathematics and was an alchemist.
Wait,
Helena said, suddenly looking serious and narrowing her eyes as she leaned towards Mackarat.
Mackarat. Was your grandfather Mackarat Keldy?
When she saw Mackarat freeze up, eyes wide, Helena clapped her hands together and stamped her feet excitedly.
You're a Keldy? Aw, and you chose a fake name based off of your grandfather. That's so darling.
If you tell anyone,
Mackarat said, wide-eyed but voice lined with ice as she balled her fists.
how in the fuck do you even know who my grandfather is?
Helena pressed her lips to a line and shrugged.
Actually, he hired me once.
Horseshit!
Mackarat spat, but Helena held up a finger.
Your grandfather was looking for some kind of pollen, the orcish stuff. Me and a few of my group were hired to go out and get some for him.
Helena said lightly as she untied her boots.
Oh yeah? What's on his face?
Mackarat demanded, hands still balled into fists. Helena placed her finger to her left eye.
He has a bristline wound just below his eye, and he takes too much sugar in his tea.
Mackarat deflated as if she were a balloon poked with the tip of a spear, now more in shock than anger.
How?
He met us at Alston Keel. We had infiltrated way deep into Orc territory from Goalmount and popped out near their war front. Paid us quite handsomely. What did he need all that pollen for anyway?
Helena asked, kicking away her untied boots.
Me.
Mackarat said weakly. Helena turned to Mackarat, unbuttoning her pants.
Huh?
The pollen was for me.
Mackarat said, stepping towards Helena.
He had been searching for months to find someone brave enough to go. You're the one who got the pollen from the chieftain hives.
Well, not just me, but yes. We managed to scoop a hive and get away clean.
Helena answered, eyebrows still drawn together quizzically as she shifted down her pants. Without warning, Mackarat lunged forward and gripped Helena in a hug. Helena shouted in surprise and was just able to jerk her foot free to keep the two of them from falling over.
Mackarat, what in the world?
The pollen was for me.
Mackarat said again, and she sniffed, resting her forehead on Helena's collarbones.
It was for me.
It took some time for Helena to calm Mackarat down enough in order to get the brim touched off of her, but she finally managed. The two of them took off the rest of their clothes and Helena perched up naked onto one of the lower rocks, Mackarat sitting on the ground as Helena washed her hair.
So it was Snowfire?
Helena asked, pouring a small stream of shampoo onto Mackarat's hair, beginning to lather the mess with her fingers. The white foam turning dark brown almost made her retch. Mackarat hummed, her head wiggling back and forth with Helena's hands.
Yeah, it was in my lungs. Local healers and other alchemists couldn't get it to leave me alone. I was young and they figured my body would fight it off. But it was beginning to choke me.
Your lungs were filling with water, probably.
Helena said as she poured fresh water over the brown suds and then added another dollop of shampoo.
The pollen run was my 7th mission with our mercenary group. A few months later, set out to grab that stupid princess. The bees are huge, like the size of birds and with the temper of a nettlewing. We had to almost light the hive on fire to get them to piss off.
What was the Orc capital like?
Mackarat said, sputtering as dirty suds washed down her lips. Helena worked the new shampoo in, content that this lot wasn't turning brown.
A lot of tents and horses, I'll tell you that much. There wasn't a permanent home in the entire lot, just smaller or bigger tent homes. There were a lot of centaurs, too.
Centaurs? Orcs hate centaurs.
Mackarat said, reaching over and grabbing the bar of soap. Helena raised her brows, sadly.
Oh, I can assure you these centaurs were feeling no love. They had chains on them and collars tied up to wagons and carts as if they were horses.
I thought orcs liked horses, though.
Makarat mused, rubbing the bar of soap across the flat of her chest, then working the suds around her rib cage and under her breasts.
They do. Their horses were in neat, tidy pens with fresh hay, straw, and water. The centaurs had nowhere, just the open sky and whatever water they gave them. We managed to slip about 20 of them out of their buildings, and they helped us steal a cart and get away with the hive. Sucker was almost 100 pounds on its own.
Helena said, pouring more water on the Makarat and removing all the suds. Makarat bowed her head as the water splashed down her face and body, leaning back up and blowing water from her mouth.
Why is this water so brown?
Because it's full of you little dirtworm.
Helena said with a laugh, then began to pour water onto her own hair with a sigh.
But yeah, we got back, turned over the centaurs to the aid stations, got paid by Makarat, then got the hell out of there. Little while later, we were snatching up a princess.
Makarat said, working a large slosh of suds onto her hands and then working the soap around her nethers and inner thighs.
How in the hills did you get mixed up in all these adventures?
Helena snorted.
There was no fucking way I was marrying that Beha boinker my father was trying to set me up with. I grabbed my hunting bow and left the morning I found out he had offered me. They were mad, at first, but changed their tune when money and goods started flowing in. Turns out I'm quite good at being a merc.
Hey, we're quite the same then, you and I.
Makarat said with a laugh, but her smile was wiped away when Helena poured cold water over her head.
Yeah, whatever you say, you little rich girl.
Helena purred, laughing happily as Makarat angrily fumed under the torrent. Makarat whipped her hair around, spraying Helena with water.
Oh, shut up!
I'd ask you to wash my hair next, but you probably had servants do yours and likely don't know how.
Helena said teasingly, and Makarat threw up her hands.
They only help me dress and get the bath ready. I know how to wash my own fucking hair.
Makarat growled, angrily getting the rest of her body washed with the suds and soap. Makarat, incensed by the implication she didn't know how to wash hair, demanded to wash Helena's, in which she obliged. After they were both fully clean for the first time since they left Tall Wheat, they put on fresh uniforms and took the time to brush their hair. By the time they left their bathing spot and popped back out onto the road, the stars were glittering above them and the moon was beginning to crawl out into the sky.
I still refuse to believe forest fae are real.
Helena said, breathing in deep the night air and smiling, feeling herself for the first time in a while. Makarat blew a raspberry at her, opening a canteen and taking a drink from it. Helena laughed and the two began to walk back towards their little camp. They were halfway down the road when Helena heard a noise in the distance some ways behind them, and she stopped, turning her head and pricking her wounded ear to the air.
What's up?
Makarat asked, slowing her walk till she stopped, a few feet in front of Helena.
A noise.
Helena said, turning to face down the road now.
It sounds like that weird flying thing from Tall Wheat.
Makarat trotted up beside her.
You mean the mighty number 9?
Yeah, but this one sounds different.
Helena said, and she squinted out into the night. She saw what she thought was stars, but they were blinking, and far too many of them to be normal. Makarat took a step backwards as the thudding became more apparent, ominous as it droned out of the black sky.
Helena? I think we need to go back.
The faint glimmer of headlights, lots of headlights, began to peak in the far distance as something came over a small hill.
I think you are right.
Helena said quickly, then turned and began to run, the cool night air washing over her face. Makarat kept pace, their boots thudding on the road and chests rapidly pumping in air to their lungs. They ran 100 paces before they heard the distant staccato thudding of a weapon reporting, and shells began to rain down behind them. The shells must have been large, as they kicked up large plumes of dirt on impact and chased after the two of them. Helena grabbed Makarat and yanked them both towards the edge of the woods, running along it instead of the open road.
Oh shit! Oh shit!
Makarat wailed as another weapon joined the first, the sound echoing towards them from far away. Trees shattered above them and rained down to the grass below. Limbs broke away and cartwheeled out into the road as 20mm HEI rounds impacted them. The rounds found passage through the trees to land just behind Helena and Makarat, racing after their heels with bursts of grass and earth. Helena could both hear and feel the small pieces of metal shrapnel whizzing past her and Makarat, and she pumped her legs all the harder.
Momoy!
Helena cried out, dumping everything else she was carrying in a final act of desperation, of which the loss of her beloved soap stung bitterly.
Momoy, start the damn bikes!
A missile flew in wide and impacted within the tree line, the concussion ringing Helena's ears and causing her to stumble, almost falling over.
Limit, get that fucking motorcycle running or I'm going to fist your heart through your ass!
Makarat screeched, ducking as a tree only 10 feet behind them simply shattered in multiple places. Several 20mm rounds detonated on impact, showering her in wood shards. Ahead of them, they heard cursing, a sloshing sound, then a sound of 3 motorbikes roaring to life. Vitka stumbled out of the tree line, attempting to unravel herself from a blanket.
What is going on?
She called out, then screamed as another tree exploded. She took off into the air, heading straight for oars without delay. Erinda stumbled out next, trying to hurriedly put on her rucksack.
Run for the city! With the machine guns!
Helena half dove, half bowled over the back of the sidecar to Eldehinda's R75, tumbling head over the spare wheel and rolling into the seat head first.
Go, go, go! Just go!
Erinda didn't wait for any other orders and took off after Vitka, this time finding it necessary to gallop.
We weren't even halfway through the ale.
Eldehinda roared as she kicked the bike in the first gear and reached down, pulling her rucksack up off the ground and slinging it over her shoulder.
I'll grab.
Momoy began, going to jump off the bike and grab the keg. Instead, a 20mm round landed near it and detonated, converting the keg from a small barrel to ale-flavored carpenter confetti.
Oh, come on.
Sounds like a rotary cannon.
Limik screamed as Makarat jumped into the air and landed ass first into his sidecar.
The human sky snake.
I hate snakes.
Momoy bellowed as he kicked his bike to life and slammed it into first gear, pulling back on the throttle and setting off with a thunderous roar. The rest of the bikes followed after, slamming down the hill towards oars. Helena scrambled around for the flare gun and loaded a shell, launching the glittering streak of light into the sky. As she feared, the forest came alive and began the fire after them, red tracers streaking through the dark over their heads. It now dawned on Helena as to why they never made a move to get them off the hill. They didn't have to, as backup was on their way. By some miracle, all 3 of them crashed onto the streets of Ors, bringing their chaos in to mingle with the cities. Auxiliaries were running around all over into fighting positions, while others began preparing weapon systems laid out in windows or rooftops. Eldehinda hooked a hard right, the sidecar's deflating wheel leaving the ground for a breath as she roared down towards the command center of the town's garrison. Erinda saw them and quickly caught up to them, her hooves knocking against the stone roadwork. They arrived at a bullet hole-ridden mayoral building, and a human first sergeant was gathered with a bunch of their fellows. He was screaming orders in English and Tunka, and Helena saw the human lone wanderers scatter, most of them running to the motor pool. He pointed to Eldehinda and then pointed to the steps leading up to the mayoral residence, and Eldehinda pulled in alongside it as the artillery battery began to open up near the rear of the city. Fuel from their motorcycles splashed down onto the street in puddles, as well as any other fluid due to the multiple holes blown through their machines.
If you fired that flare, that means we have a party coming our way, doesn't it?
The human asked. Eldehinda nodded.
Something was shooting at us. My specialist believes that it was something called a sky snake.
The human cursed in English, then pointed to another human, one that Helena recognized.
Grouch, get over here.
The kilted human jogged over, rifle held lazily by a single hand, and he smiled in recognition to Helena. "Hey, I know you. How's my bow?" Helena rustled around in her sidecar where she had the bow stored safely and held it up.
Still got it.
Hey, that's great, Grouch began, but slowed to a jog, his eyes going wide as he caught sight of Erinda. Oh my stars and stripes.
Grouch, hello?
The other human said, snapping his fingers. Grouch turned to him and pointed a finger. You shut your whore mouth, Henry. It can wait.
It can wait? They're a fucking cobra?
Henry started, but Grouch made a shush sound with his hand. Shut your fucking mouth, he stated, then stepped towards Erinda, taking off his patrol cap and bowing slightly forward. My lady.
Oh!
Erinda said, looking around in startled, sweaty confusion at Section 222.
Hello there, sir.
Oh, for fuck's sakes.
Helena growled, then angrily got out of her sidecar. Henry sighed and placed his hands on his hips, shaking his head back and forth as Grouch walked up to Erinda and took her hand in his. You cannot believe what a pleasure this is for me. I've always wanted to meet such a fascinating woman like you, Grouch said, giving her a charming smile and kissing the top of her hand.
My goodness!
Erinda said with a blushing laugh as artillery thundered and Puma armored cars roared past on the road. Eldehinda looked from Grouch to Henry, then back to Grouch.
Is this human serious? Laying on the moves here?
Grouch?
Henry called out, then picked up the anger in his voice when Grouch didn't acknowledge him.
Grouch, the cobras.
Grouch turned around, still holding Erinda's hand. Can't you give a man 5 fucking seconds to enjoy meeting the pinnacle of what a woman should be?
Oh my, pinnacle!
Erinda said with a laugh, looking over at Eldehinda, who rolled her eyes, and Helena, who punched the trunk of the sidecar angrily. Vitka came flapping down and landed near Momoy, reaching out with her wings and hugging Leone.
Mama survived. They're big gray. Why everyone angry? What happened while Vitka away?
She asked, looking around at Helena, still punching the sidecar trunk interior, and Erinda giggling like a schoolgirl. I have to go take care of some pressing matters, but I would love to have a chat with you, perhaps over a nice cup of tea. Grouch asked Erinda, his face glowing and beard braids glittering. Erinda blushed again and gestured with her free hand towards Section 222.
Well, I'll have to ask my escort, but I think we can manage a small meeting after all the fighting is done for the day.
Lovely. Absolutely lovely. Grouch said with another grin and a wink. He gave her hand a pat with his, released it, then turned to Henry. All right, dickhead, what do you want?
Oh, thanks, Grouch. Good of you to take time out of your day to help us kill helicopters.
Henry growled out, then pointed a bladed hand towards the motor pool.
Go with the rest of your lot and get the Pumas with the twin juices. They just got their gremlin upgrades and can help us track the cobras. Shoot to kill if they decide to pop up.
Oh, yes, sir. You got it, sir. Uh-huh. Oh, yep. Grouch said, giving Henry almost one salute per word while running off towards said motor pool. Henry glowered at Grouch, then turned to Eldehinda.
God, I hate that guy.
You're telling me? What kind of man doesn't wear pants?
Eldehinda replied while cocking her head, the reports of tanks firing catching her ears.
I am curious about the skirt.
Erinda said, watching Grouch run off.
Is it some kind of human culture thing?
Highland warrior culture, it's stupid.
Henry said, then walked up to Eldehinda while pulling out a map.
I need your...
Before that, First Sergeant.
Eldehinda said, pointing a finger at Erinda.
We were ordered by Yule himself to escort this dignity. Where we have to go, she has to go, and vice versa.
Henry looked to her, then to the centaur and openly growled in frustration.
Section 222, I presume?
Accurate and able.
Eldehinda said, giving Henry a wink. Helena jogged up, pulling out her own smaller map that she had been searching for in the sidecar's trunk.
First Sergeant, I saw vehicles coming up the road before we were fired on. Lots of headlights. Lots of them.
Right.
Henry said, smacking the map of ores on his thigh and looking around.
Well, as much as I would like to allow you lot to have a pint in the inn, I need you to pull Overwatch somewhere at least. Take your section and head down to the artillery batteries. Relieve an equal number of infantry there and send them up to the edges of the city.
Can do it up.
Eldehinda said, then made a whirling circular motion with her finger to the rest of Section 222. They continued their lumpy, jostling, deflating journey down the main road, pulling to the side to allow tank destroyers and other larger vehicles mastery of the road. They puttered up to the large earthwork fortification behind the city, motorcycles begging for death. Here, M119 howitzers sat in their circular platforms, and even now were sending flare rounds and high explosive shells raining down into the forest far beyond their own sight. Helena found it curious that each M119 sat in front of its own half-track, these ones more modernized than the ones Helena remembered. Beside the guns were mountains of empty shell casings that sat in haphazard piles. When the loader pulled back on a lever above the breech, the hot smoking shell would fall into their hands, and they would toss it upon the pile with a rattle of brass. The noise was extreme as all the guns fired their missions together, and Helena ducked her head, quickly stuffing fluff into her ears. Eldehinda ran off to find the nearest platoon sergeant while everyone else got to their feet. Helena turned and saw a mass of more modern half-tracks moving as a unit across the earthworks, their engines roaring as infantry ran alongside. These seemed maybe a bit wider with proper top decking to protect the passengers. To Helena, it looked as if some aspects of the Striker had been borrowed, updating the vehicle considerably. While some had the decking, others were still open-hatched. Two wide doors flipped open and motor tubes poking out from the depths.
Where are they going, you think?
Helena asked to the air, watching the vehicles rumble away towards the southern side of the city. Momoe shrugged.
Probably the welcoming party for whoever attacked you.
More vehicles roared up the road from the motor pool, and Helena took them in as well. These were Pumas, again updated and a little wider with more weaponry lodged into their turrets. She spied Grouch in the lead car, then realized all of the Pumas were crammed with humans. They swerved left, and Helena saw that each Puma had an open turret with two M2 heavy machine guns sat side by side on a pintle. These M2s were flanked with gremlin hardware and protected by a curving metal shield.
Where are they going with those?
Limerick asked, quickly pulling out a notebook and scribbling down in it. Eldehinda jogged back up, having heard Limerick.
They're going bird hunting. Or trying to anyway.
She turned and pointed towards a series of large olive-drab field tents at the rear of the earthworks.
We've been asked to go there and report to another human named Kentucky.
Ah, the drinker.
Momoe said with a smile and fired his reluctant WLA back to life. Section 222 parked their grim bikes behind the large field tents while Erinda trotted forward, squinting at a sign.
What does this sign say? It's written in some other language I don't know. And I know a lot of languages.
A nearby dwarf private set down his crate, walking towards the sign and pointing at it while speaking to Erinda.
It's English, one of the human languages. It says fire-based fiddling fairy. I think it's some kind of inside joke with the humans.
Fire-based fiddling fairy? What a horrible name for a fort. Does this whole thing light on fire if we have to retreat?
Erinda asked, and the dwarf just laughed in response and carried on with his task. As Section 222 and Erinda entered the large tent, they realized that this was the headquarters of the artillery batteries. The many wooden tables scattered with radios, reports, and charts outlining charge amounts and elevations. At one of these tables, an odd female human sat, rolling a libation. Kentucky was a pretty rough-looking customer, Helena observed, and she was as strange as the rest of them. Her hair was raven feather black, her eyes bright green, but it was as if she was at war with her feminine side. She had cut her hair recently, a bit shorter now around the cheeks, side-shaven, and her uniform could be called eclectic to say the least. Despite being a sergeant major, she considered herself a lone wanderer and dressed as such. While she wore the black leather combat boots and uniform bottoms of the auxiliaries, she wore a bright, odd floral shirt with a bright pink undershirt that said something in English. As Adina, Helena, and her section approached, Kentucky raised her brows at the approaching centaur and plucked the hand-rolled cigarette from her lips.
Holy shit, they do exist.
Kentucky said with a laugh, slapping her thigh and standing up from her field chair.
Well now, look at the size of you. I thought you'd be a lot bigger, like a quarter horse.
Adina furrowed her brows.
Well, I am a palfrey. We're the smallest of the centaurs. That explains it.
Kentucky said sagely, and Helena didn't think she actually understood what she had just heard.
Well, you are welcome here. We have a small sleeping areas for messengers and runners in the next 10 over. You can unshoulder your shit and have a good couple hours of sleep, as long as nothing exciting happens.
Helena stepped forward, raising a hand.
Sergeant
Kentucky.
Kentucky said with a nod, grabbing a piece of paper and holding it over her rank.
Kentucky.
Helena corrected, blinking a few times before continuing.
There is a lot of enemy vehicles coming our way. How can we just go sleep?
Pumadooses have warded off their helicopters with a few tracer bursts thanks to our gremlins being able to both hear and feel them coming. Mortar half-tracks have peppered them a bit and caused them to stop their push, more than likely regrouping and radioing in to their support in the woods. We have 10 hours or so until they figure out a plan and push in on us.
They outnumber us greatly,
Momoy said, unshouldering his M240 Bravo and setting the buttstock on the ground.
If they push on us, can we hold?
Surely.
Kentucky said with a smile, tapping the map.
This is going to be a big display of power here in Ors. We have more armor already rolling our way. Those fancy Abram killers and the updated version of a few others. Whoever wins here will control the tone of the battle.
Helena held up her hand again.
Kentucky, we are in a lowland. We can be easily surrounded here, can't we?
Kentucky nodded.
Oh yes. We have no doubt we're going to be attacked on all fronts tomorrow.
Aren't you worried?
Helena asked, and Adina perked her ears up as Kentucky laughed.
Worried? Of course I am.
Kentucky gestured to Eldehinda.
But as it turns out, her friends have been hiding a lot of surprises from us. And they are almost ready to come out and play for a spell.
And that's the end of Chapter 7 of Section 222. Lines for Chapter 8 are already out there. Be coming back here soon. I hope you guys enjoyed. I am bleeding so much. Holy fuck. I cut my lip during recording, and I am bleeding profusely. And I cannot figure out how the hell my teeth cut my own lip. Anyway. My mouth tastes like copper. Or iron or whatever. Fuck it. Tastes like blood. But, what's the fuck I'm talking about? Right. If you like the story and others like them, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel of Garbro's Field Desk. If you really like the story, want to help keep this thing running because we are not monetized because YouTube hates my fucking guts, stop by the coffee link down below, donate $1 or $2. Everything helps, anything helps. There's also the affiliate Redcon 1, and additionally there's also a merch store where I'm selling t-shirts. I have it priced, alright, where the margins are just enough where I make like $2, alright, but I figured if people want a t-shirt, I'd rather see someone wearing a merch shirt than me getting a lot of money for said merch shirt. You know what I mean? That's kind of the mentality I have. And now if you want to watch kind of like some of the RPG games on Twitch, Fridays and Mondays we are doing more or less Verada TTRPG games on, I think it's just called Garbro on Twitch or Garbeardia, something of the sort, I don't know. But usually I post links and alerts in the community posts, so keep an eye out for those if you want to watch those. But yeah, I am bleeding profusely, so I gotta get my lip stopped bleeding. But that was Dusty Parch, our senior female VA, Eliza, Vin, the Aristic Rider, Amanda, our new female VA for Helena and other roles, and Fire. And until we see you next time on this side of the veil, this is the crew of Garbro's Field Desk, and we'll see you next time. Stay safe out there.